Welcome to the League of Women Voters Virtual Candidate Forum for the Board of Education. The League is proud to support voter education and to continue our long history of hosting candidate forums. The Wake County Board of Education is a local governing body of the Wake County Public School System. It is the largest school district in North Carolina and the 15th largest in the United States. It serves a very diverse student body and has improved its graduation rate so that almost 90% graduate from high school. Its 9 members are currently elected from separate county districts. Each member represents that district within the entire board and is elected by residents of that district. All candidates are nonpartisan, meaning they are not running as representatives of a political party. The school board sets policy for the school system implemented by the superintendent and the administrative staff. The board also adopts an annual budget proposal that includes its request for local funding from the Wake County Board of Commissioners, as well as its plan for using state and federal funds. The school board does not have taxing authority. Today, we welcome candidates for District 7, Chris Haggerty and Rachel Mills. District 7 is in the northwest corner of Wake County and encompasses parts of Morrisville, Cary, and North Raleigh. Both candidates live in District 7. Welcome, Chris and Rachel. Thank you for joining us today. We will ask every candidate for the Wake County Board of Education the same questions. The questions will cover a range of issues relevant to the scope of the board. I'd like to verify with both that neither of you have received these questions in advance.
I have not.
I have not received them.
Thank you. You may now have 2 minutes for an introductory statement. Chris, you may go first.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the forum. Thanks for choosing to participate with us virtually today. I'm Chris Haggerty. I'm your District 7 representative on the Wake County Board of Education. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Wake County for hosting the forum and also wish everybody a happy 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment this year. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a 40-plus year resident of Wake County. So I went to Wake County schools, graduated from Wake County schools, and my wife and I raise our children here in Wake County Public Schools. We have 9 years of experience as active parents, volunteers, as a PTA officer, doing what we can to make our local schools a better place. In my service on the school board, I've tried to use that perspective as a parent to guide the work that I do. I feel strongly about protecting our children. I've worked hard to fight vaping that's going on in our schools. I've worked to try to increase awareness about youth suicide prevention. And I worked really hard and I was successful in increasing the number of school counselors in our schools in the past year. Since coming on the school board, one of the things that shocked me the most was how over capacity so many of our schools are. And this is where Wake County has not kept up school construction to match Wake County's growth. And that impacts everything from bus schedules, from when schools start, to really restricting parent choices about which schools they can send their kids to. So I'm going to continue to work hard to protect our kids, to build new schools. We had opened up some in Western Wake, another one coming up in Raleigh, and to help improve the process, to improve communication, increase transparency, and really try to make the school board as responsive as possible. Thank you for your consideration today, and thanks for participating.
Thank you. Rachel, you are up next.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to Mary Ann Lewin for hosting this forum and the important work you all do for voters. I am a real estate agent with 10 years experience. I have 5 years Capitol Hill experience in a senior staff position. I graduated UNC Chapel Hill and took coursework at Oxford University and the Keenan Flagler Business School. I'm also a market analyst and communications consultant for Lear Capital, a precious metals firm out of Beverly Hills. Mostly, I'm a concerned mom of 2 boys in elementary school. When we moved to Wake County 8 years ago, we were anticipating raising our sons in one of the best school systems in the state, if not the country. At the time, the conservative school board had put in place policies that made that a reasonable expectation. Shortly after, the current liberal progressive school board took over. Under their mismanagement, Wake County schools have sadly eroded. COVID has brought that fact front and center in every Wake County parent's world. This school board has had months to anticipate the needs of various reopening scenarios, and here we are scrambling last minute, still trying to figure out the funding for Chromebooks promised to every child that needs one for online learning. What happened to the ones they distributed in the spring? Meanwhile, nearly $6 million has been flushed into the Office of Equity Affairs that educates no one, but seeks to indoctrinate everyone, even teachers. We need an in-depth audit of the school budget to make sure funds are allocated based on our priorities and the one job Wake County Schools has in this community, and that is educating our kids. I don't have any problems with Mr. Haggerty. He seems like a really nice man. I appreciate his willingness to serve on the board the last 2 years. He stepped up to the plate when no one else would after Kathy Hartenstein's unfortunate passing, but the fact is, we didn't choose him, he was appointed. And he's been part of the school board that gave us these problems. That same school board cannot fix them. We need leadership. We need someone willing to ask the hard questions and challenge what's going on. We need change. We need a sense of normalcy in our schools. We need to educate our children in a functional way. If over half the student body has elected to go all virtual, that's great. That combined with unenrollment for homeschool and private should mean that we shouldn't have capacity problems with the rest of the student body.
Okay,
and we should reopen for in-person schooling as soon as possible for those that want it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, first question. Beyond the technology funding that the CARES Act has already provided, what policies, procedures, and strategies would you implement to improve equity across students to close the achievement gap that has harmful effect on children of color, economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and English language learners? Rachel, you may go first.
I think when teachers have been polled as to equity and whether our students are treated equitably, 76% of them responded that we are treating them with equity and we don't have a problem there. I think our main focus needs to be on education and getting scores up. I think we put too much money into this Office of Equity Affairs and not enough money on actual education and focusing on scores. So I would look really hard at teacher outcomes and test scores and make sure that we're getting the results that we need. I would just make sure that we listen to parents and make sure that we're providing the options that work best for their students, because one size does not fit all.
Thank you. Chris, your turn.
So thank you, Marian. One of the things that we see is that not every child arrives at school in the same place academically as others. And so, you're right, one size does not always fit all. How can we get students coming into schools that might be behind or disadvantaged up to speed and on par and ready to learn with all of their classmates? One of the things that we do that I think we could do better is with our pre-K education. With pre-K programs, we can help children get up to speed on their reading. We do a lot of early screenings to identify potential learning disabilities. It can even be something that's not necessarily it could be problems with hearing or eyesight that parents just haven't documented, that we can identify and correct and get them ready. Investing in those kids, particularly these kids that are coming from low-income households, can improve our overall student performance when you have a whole classroom filled with active, enthusiastic, and ready learners. So we really need to get everybody up to speed. I think pre-K is probably one of the best programs we have for that.
Thank you. Next question. School systems across the state and country are struggling to develop educational plans in response to the ever-changing nature of the pandemic. Do you expect the post-pandemic school system to be less dependent on physical structures and staff and be able to serve the students just as well? Chris, you may go first.
Well, I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons coming out of the pandemic and the COVID-19 response. But I think, I think my opponent and I will have disagreements on issues, but I think we'll both agree that live instruction is best for kids. Kids are going to do better when they are in schools. Now, how we deliver that education might change. I've talked about school construction and the need to increase our school capacity, because right now, when we force so many kids into overcrowded schools, we can't social distance them. We can't follow all of these state guidelines for, COVID-19 safety protocols, because there's just simply not enough room. I think there are some advantages that we'll get from a remote learning experience. We might learn how to keep schools and instruction open when we've had school closings due to weather, for example. We'll find out, are there ways, if students have had extended illnesses, that they might be able to continue their learning remotely. So there are some positives we can take from it. But overall, I think the biggest experience is that, what do we need to do to be better prepared when situations like this happen? And I do want to go back and address something in terms of preparation. So if we go back and we look at when schools first closed and what was going on, and when the demand was to school close, nobody predicted exactly how long this would ask. I think there's a lot of revisionist history going on, but just go back and look at everyone's public comments, their social media feeds. Many people thought this COVID crisis would end in the summer, and we were considered pessimistic for considering a second wave in the fall. Meanwhile, in making the preparations to go forward, we've had to deal with a shifting landscape where the advice we get from health and medical experts changes almost daily. Remember when they told us that masks weren't helpful and should not be used, and now masks are recommended. The state government has handed down, I've got two manuals up here. One's 116 pages, one's 26 pages of guidelines that we have to follow. And they've changed that 3 times since we came back this summer to try to come up with a reopening plan.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel, would you like to answer that question?
Oh, so many thoughts, so many thoughts. Well, first I will address the question about relying on structures. First of all, I would like to know what's happened to enrollment since all of this has begun. I know that something like 55% have opted for all virtual. I might be wrong on that, but it's something like half. And that's great that we are providing that choice. I think that's one of the positives, one of the silver linings that has come from all this is we've been forced to provide options that we wouldn't have thought of before. And if that's working out for some parents, I think that's great. I think it's great for them to be able to continue that. But I know that the homeschool office where you submit your plans to homeschool, I know that that was overwhelmed with so many notices that it crashed. And I know that the private schools are running out of space. So I know that there's been reduced enrollment. I actually don't know why we couldn't open in person right now. My son is lucky enough to go to a charter, and they have figured out how to hold in-person classes. I have pulled my other son out to go to a private, and they are planning to do in-person. So I don't know why they're under the same overall restrictions from the governor. They've figured out a way. I know that we're dealing with a larger student body, but still, I don't see why we're sending kids to the Y and charging them $600 a month for them not to be taught. Like whatever they've come up with is very dysfunctional, and I know it's been difficult, but I think they could have done a better job, and it's been very chaotic for parents. And I'm wondering if we need structures, if we're even dealing with overcrowding in Wake County Public Schools when the dust falls after all of this. And also to address Chris, metrics. I would love a metric that would tell us when COVID is over, like when is the crisis over? From what I can tell, the cases increase commensurate with testing. If we want to look for more cases, all we'd have to do is test more people. So if we're testing more, we're finding more cases. At what point I mean, are we looking at hospitalizations
Okay.
or death rates or something to tell us that the crisis is over?
All right, thank you very much, Rachel. Now I'm going to move on to question 3. Racial inequity and the long resulting school to prison pipeline has been a long-standing problem in our schools, and there have been many strategies used to address it. The presence of law enforcement in the schools has become a recent flashpoint, at least pre-pandemic. Do you think it's time to reevaluate the use of school resource officers in the public schools? Do you have any recommendations? Rachel, you may go first.
Well, I do know that about a year ago, the governor looked at the situation as far as student resource officers, and his determination was that there needs to be more of them. What I would like to see is a well-defined role for what an SRO does. I feel in this day and age of school shootings, and we're all still, very concerned about that possibility, that in the event of a bad guy with a gun, we need a good guy with a gun. So I would like a clearly defined role of what they're there for. I remember at one of the last shootings, the SRO kind of hid and waited for backup while the gunman was in there shooting kids. So like, that's not good. I want to make sure that we're clear on what they're there for. I also remember a story out of Orlando where a 6-year-old was having a tantrum and the SRO put her in handcuffs and hauled her off to jail. Like, I don't think that's good either. So I want a clearly defined role and good training for what they're there for and what they're not there for. I think they're there for security. I think they're there to reduce violence, just for law and order. And we need that in our schools these days. And I hate the idea of an actual school to prison pipeline. And I wonder if there's disciplinary measures that are being delayed that could help with that. So those are all the issues that I would look at.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I think that we've identified a number of issues right there. Obviously we want security in the schools and we do want to have protection against violence, but as Rachel said, are the systems we have in place working? She mentioned some national examples. Even locally, we've had examples where there's been SRO violence against another student, racial epithets used by an SRO against other students. And that's not right. That's not why those officers are there. You look at policing in our schools, you look at the officers and what they go to the academy and what they're trained for. This isn't the duty that they're trained for, so we can have safe schools, we can have, community policing, we can have watchful eyes on the school. I think we both agree that that's very, very important. But, in terms of our current SRO program, like I said, there's too many questions. Is it really meeting the goal of what it's intended for? And so when you start looking at, the prison, the school to prison pipeline, as you called it, and Rachel hit on this right at the end, one of the things to look at is discipline, and is discipline meted out appropriately? One thing that we have to look at is that all of us, adults and minors, have rights. And then when our rights are threatened, who defends those rights? We have some parents, some children that have the benefit of parents that'll come in and can fight for them, can hire attorneys, can get them out of disciplinary charges against them. Other parents or other students without those kind of privileges don't have that. And they might be suffering disproportionately when you look at the number of referrals, when you look at the types of things they're cited for that their classmates aren't cited for, and the punishments that are handed out. When you take kids out of the system, they stop learning. And once they get behind, they can spiral downward. And then without the benefit of that good education, what opportunities are they going to have? So I agree. I think looking at the SROs, ways we can reform and improve that, and then also looking at discipline, I think that's a good approach.
Thank you very much. Next question. Parents in Wake County have many options for educating their
Mhm.
children. Should the Wake County Public School System and the leadership of the school board choose to coexist within those options? Or should they focus on creating a public school system that is equally attractive and serves all the students and all the families in Wake County? Chris, you may go first.
I'm not.
Well, there are lots of parents have a lot of
Mhm.
options.
Right.
And
So,
is your role as a leader in the school board, is it to accept those options and just work with
okay.
the people who choose to stay within the school system, or do you want to bring everybody back?
Okay, I got you. So look, growing up in Wake County has a great tradition of public schools and private schools. You know, they didn't have charter schools here when I grew up, but we had excellent private schools, and several of the families in my neighborhood choose to send their kids to private schools. Oftentimes, these are for religious reasons, which I respect. And, you know, these are fine, high quality institutions. You know, a system of public education is not exclusive it's not the only option for parents. I think it provides healthy competition, you know, and we need to work in our public schools to be able to provide as quality as an education as parents can get elsewhere. Now, does that mean that every private option, every charter option is a great option? I think they have strengths and weaknesses. You know, I've hired graduates of some local charter schools in Raleigh, and they've been tremendous employees. I've also seen some charter schools around the state that have some real weaknesses and have gotten in trouble. You know, I think our advantage, we have to operate with a strict regulatory framework in the public schools that, you know, the schools outside of that framework don't have to operate under. So they're going to have some advantages. But if we can work hard and we can prepare all those who choose to send their kids to public schools, we need to do the best job possible to get their kids prepared to be good, productive citizens and to be prepared for a job and operate in the real world, in the outside world. And I think we just keep striving for that. You know, I don't begrudge anybody who chooses another option for their kids. I just want to make sure our public schools provide the best option that they can.
Thank you. Rachel?
That was a good answer, Chris. I like that. I am a huge proponent of school choice. I have a son that just started at Magellan Charter. We were very lucky to win the lottery. And I think as far as coexisting, I think there's too much of an adversarial relationship between traditional public schools and charters. I think the advantage of having charters around is they are not subject to so much regulation. They're little laboratories of education where teachers are allowed to try different things. They've got a little more autonomy, and we can see from their results what's working and what's not working. And rather than seeing that as adversarial, we need to see those as examples of, you know, maybe what to do and what not to do as far as change in the public school. I have also pulled out my other son to do a private school, but my hope is that I can be part of making the public schools better and improving them and put him back in. Because right now there's just not the option available to me in public school that works for my family. And a lot of parents are finding the same thing. And so we need to make sure that the public schools are as good as they can possibly be for those that don't have choices. But for the choices that do exist, they should help make the public schools better and more competitive. And we should have an attitude of competing for students and see parents as customers, you know, rather than adversaries. So I do see a cooperative relationship with the choices that parents make, and I hope that we can make a rising tide float all boats, so to say. So.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, this is going to be our last question. Do you support the ongoing efforts to adjust the curriculum to reflect current concerns facing our community? Recently, there's been the addition of a financial literacy component within the high school social studies program. Other groups would like to see the addition of a civics or government component or content on systemic racism introduced into the coursework. How should the school board address those concerns?
Who first?
Oh, Rachel, you're first.
As far as curriculum choices, I know that there's been a lot of dissatisfaction with the MVP math program among a lot of parents that are very vocal about that. And the other items that you mentioned, one thing that I've heard is that the financial literacy is going to displace teaching history. As a history major at UNC Chapel Hill, I'm not happy about that. However, I am for school choice, even within the school and even within curriculum. I think as many options as we can provide to parents, the better, you know, and if they want to opt into various electives, that would be great. So it should be a matter of both and, not either or. So if we're displacing something critical like history, then I'm not happy. But if we're augmenting our curriculum, then that's good. And the same with MVP math. Maybe it's working just swimmingly for some students. I haven't heard of any students that it's working really well for. But I think there's a dire need for parents to be able to choose traditional math education if that's what they feel works best for their kids. So choice, even within the school.
Thank you. Chris.
So this is something that coming on to the board, I've had to kind of struggle with and learn because, the school board itself doesn't actually pick the curriculum, right? We get handed a list of standards and a lot from the state government. And for example, the push for financial literacy came from our state legislature. Some of the push to add more civics has come from the legislature. And like Rachel, I'm really upset that they're moving us away from our history courses and pushing out this key component to becoming a good citizen to teach other skills. And some of these are good skills. I support financial literacy efforts, but sometimes you wonder, do we need all of this direction from the state versus having that local choice in how we set the tone? I think some of the ways we might be able to do that, with our magnet programs, for example, that we can have the opportunity maybe to create a classical studies magnet that might focus on more traditional teaching methods. When the magnet programs first created in the 80s, they had some of these. They phased them out over time. But if there's a parent demand for it, that could be maybe a very successful model. Again, looking at the MVP math, is there a way to return to have an academy school that did teach a more traditional style of doing that? I agree. I think we have the opportunity to, again, have some of these laboratories of democracy, laboratories of education within our magnet program, and the applications to the schools will be like a vote by parents of what kinds of things they support. The other thing that's important is that we give our teachers and educators kind of a, more of a say and more of a voice as well. I agree with having the parent voice, but also the educator's voice in what curriculum are adopted, how they're adopted. You can have a career teacher who's successfully educated students for decades very well. And when you thrust a new curriculum on them without any input, you're asking them to almost start over when they could be getting good results. Because and I'll end with this on it. We don't get a lot of money from the state for curriculum, for textbooks. And that leads a lot of teachers to have to go out, spend their own money, get on Pinterest and all of these free sites trying to get curriculum for the schools. We need to do a better job than that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, now we're moving into the closing part of the forum. Thank you to the candidates for coming today to participate in our virtual candidate forum. We recognize that running and serving an elected office is a considerable commitment of time, energy, and often sacrificed opportunities. The League, along with the residents of Wake County, is grateful that we have so many capable fellow citizens who are willing to step forward to serve the important duties as a member of the Wake County Board of Education. You will now have 2 minutes each to make a closing statement. Chris, you may go first.
Okay, thank you. So I have a lot I can't say, but what I want to do is I'm going to forego my closing statement to help explain the questions that were raised about COVID and why we can't get more kids in the schools. I've sketched it out. I know you can't see it, but I'll do my best to explain it. So right now, for example, say we have 3 fifth grade classes in a school. We have 26 kids in those classes. Under the state guidelines, we can't have more than, say, 10 kids per class. So when you take those 3 classes of 26, you would get, you would get 78 kids. You would need 8 classrooms in a school that's not going to have 5 extra classrooms. So then repeat that per grade. So we created the virtual academy, and this is something I really pushed hard for, to give the parents and the families a choice who wanted to opt out of instruction. And that did create more space. But look what happens. With those same 78 kids, you take half out. 39 are now in the virtual academy. 39 are left in the schools. You need 1, 2, 3, 4 classrooms, not the 8, and you have 2 virtual classes. But you still only have 3 teachers. You still only have 3 teachers. And so even with the virtual academy, you're still trying to educate the same number of students. And so that's why we can't bring them all back right now. Even moving kids to the virtual academy, creating that space, we don't have the teachers to teach all of those classes. And so I get it. I'm a parent of 2. I'm frustrated. I want to get kids back in the classroom as safely as possible. But a lot of this just really is logistics, and that we can't just magically make more classrooms appear. And we've been hiring teachers. We're at 99% capacity, but we can't fill all of these spaces. And we don't know how long we'll need them. So we can't offer people a job for just a few months. Why would they take it? So these are some of the challenges. With that, I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. I want to thank Rachel for her participation and her great answers today. I've used my closing statement to try to explain this COVID, but if you want more information about my campaign, please visit my website, haggertyforschools.com, and I look forward to the campaign. Thank you all so much for watching.
Thank you. Rachel.
I want to address one thing that Chris said about curriculum choice. I think the way he's envisioning it is very different from how I'm envisioning it. He's saying applications and going to magnet schools, but I think it needs to be within a school. Like, I don't want to see parents submitting applications and then getting turned down. I know that there's hundreds, if not thousands, on wait lists for charter schools, and they're not able to access them. I would want to see it more responsive. I would want to see a system that's more like polling parents what they want, and then creating available space to satisfy those needs, and not the other way around. I want to say, as far as COVID and capacity, we're scrambling for these YMCAs, for space there. And the teachers get free childcare at the school, while the school is mostly empty right now. And asking Wake County parents to pay an additional $600 a month for their child to sit in a learning center or a learning pod in front of a screen all day is not good education policy. It is madness. And I'm really wondering why the FAST Child Care Centers, Wake County Schools, is scrambling to assemble with the YMCA and Marbles and others. Why is that safer than school buildings? And why are the adults supervising those not at risk? Is there something about the actual act of teaching in a classroom that spreads COVID? Parents are cutting back hours. They're quitting jobs if they have them still because of this, and it is disproportionately pushing women out of the workforce. People are leaving public schools in droves because the schools are producing an education so dysfunctional that they can't give it away right now. So that's why we need change. Chris, as nice as you are, I know that you're sort of a creature of the Democratic Party. You've been a Democrat and a liberal for your entire career. And as much as we may agree on a lot of things, I fear that if you're on the board with the remaining Democrats, and if you were the swing voter, you'd vote for them rather than for these principles that I've presented. So it's a matter of really needing a systemic change on the whole board. And I need to be part of the new, fresh conservative blood that gets in there.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. We close our forum now. Be sure to go to vote411.org to learn more about the candidates on your ballot and to learn the latest information on polling place hours and location. Thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate both candidates putting themselves out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.